Imagine being a teenager in the Paleolithic era, staring across a campfire at someone you fancy, with absolutely no dating apps, no social media, and no shared language for flirting. How exactly did our ancestors, living in small, roving bands of hunter gatherers, manage the complex, high stakes business of finding a mate and forming lasting unions? To understand how ancient humans did romance, we have to throw out everything we think we know about modern dating. We often project our current norms, monogamy, romantic love, and wedding rings, back onto the past. But for the vast majority of human history, these things didn't exist in the way we recognize them. Biology came first. Humans are social primates. We are wired to pair up, but not necessarily in the neat, suburban way that 20th century sitcoms suggested. For most of the Pleistocene, which spans from about 2.6 million years ago to roughly 11,700 years ago, our ancestors lived in small, egalitarian bands of maybe 20 to 50 people. In these groups, the pool of potential mates was incredibly small. If you were a man in a tribe of 30, you might have two or three available women. If you were a woman, you had a similar set of options. This creates a biological pressure known as exogamy, the practice of seeking a mate outside your own immediate group. It's an evolutionary mechanism to prevent inbreeding, which is a genetic death sentence. So, how did they meet people outside their band? They met at the social mixers of the Paleolithic, seasonal gathering sites. Thousands of years ago, human bands weren't static. They followed the migration patterns of megafauna like woolly mammoths or the seasonal blooming of nuts and tubers. Archaeologists have found evidence of massive aggregation sites, places where distant, separate bands would congregate at specific times of the year, perhaps during a seasonal salmon run or a fruit harvest. These weren't just buffets for food, they were the original speed dating events. You'd show up with your tribe, and suddenly, the dating pool jumps from 5 people to 200. This was where the actual business of mate selection happened. It was a chaotic, high stakes social marketplace. Now, how did you signal interest? You couldn't just send a DM. You had to use the one tool every human has always possessed: body language and display. In the animal kingdom, sexual selection is brutal. A peacock shows off its feathers, a bowerbird builds an elaborate nest. Ancient humans weren't that different. We have evidence of prestige signaling dating back tens of thousands of years. We see it in the distribution of high-quality lithic tools, spear points made of obsidian or flint that came from hundreds of miles away. If you were a man, your value was often tied to your ability to provide calories and safety. You showed your worth by being a skilled hunter or a master toolmaker. If you walked into a tribal gathering carrying a spear with a tip crafted from exotic volcanic glass sourced from a mountain 3 weeks' walk away, you were broadcasting a very specific message. I am intelligent, I am persistent, and I have the connections to travel far. Women had their own methods of sexual signaling. While the archaeological record is biased toward tools, we know through ethnographic studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies, like the Hadza of Tanzania or the Juhuansi of the Kalahari, that reproductive health and social status were the primary currencies of attraction. Once the interest was established, what did a relationship actually look like? Here is where we need to dispel the caveman myth. The stereotype is that men were possessive brutes who dragged women by their hair to a cave. Genetic evidence and anthropological research suggest the exact opposite. Early human society was likely defined by a system of serial pair bonding and high levels of female autonomy. Because women provided the bulk of the calories through foraging, they held significant social power. They weren't property, they were partners. If a union was toxic or didn't work out, it was relatively easy for a person to leave and join a different band. There was no divorce court, just a social rearrangement. But what about love? Was it just transactional? There is a biological argument that romantic love evolved as a pair bonding mechanism. When a human infant is born, it is incredibly helpless. It takes years to become independent. Compare a baby giraffe, which can stand within an hour of birth, to a human baby, which takes a year to walk and a decade to be truly self-sufficient. From an evolutionary standpoint, the parents who stayed together to raise their children had a higher survival rate for their offspring. Nature selected for love, the cocktail of oxytocin, dopamine, and vasopressin that keeps two people focused on each other long enough to ensure the survival of their child. So, in the Paleolithic, dating was less about a candlelight dinner and more about a calculated biological alliance. But it was also deeply emotional. We know this because of burial rituals. At sites like the Sungir burial in Russia, dating to about 30,000 years ago, we see children buried with thousands of ivory beads stitched into their clothes, likely taking thousands of hours of labor to produce. This isn't just survival, this is deep, profound human affection. The same capacity for grief and love that we feel today was present in them. They felt the sting of a breakup and the warmth of a partnership just as sharply as we do. As we moved into the Neolithic period around 10,000 years ago, everything changed. We invented agriculture. We stopped wandering. We started owning land. This is the moment where dating died and marriage was born. When humans began to own property, fields, livestock, houses, the stakes of mating shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't just about finding a person you liked, it was about ensuring that your property went to your biological heirs. Paternity certainty became the most important thing in the world. This is where the control of female sexuality began. Suddenly, we see the emergence of dowries, arranged marriages, and stricter social taboos. The freedom to wander off and join another band disappeared because you couldn't move your wheat field or your stone house. You were stuck with your neighbors. If you didn't like your spouse, you were forced to make it work because of the economic necessity of the farm. For 95% of human history, relationships were fluid, based on proximity and driven by the need for cooperative survival. For the last 5%, we've been trying to force those ancient biological drives into the rigid, legalistic boxes of modern society. We often wonder why modern dating feels so stressful or unnatural. Maybe it's because we are attempting to use the brain of a Pleistocene hunter-gatherer, a brain wired for small bands and flexible, high-trust social networks, to navigate a world of 7 billion people and digital algorithms. Our ancestors didn't have the one. They had a social circle of 50 people and a biological drive to connect. They were pragmatic, they were communal, and they were constantly evaluating each other for long-term reliability. When you look at a prehistoric site, don't see a collection of rocks or bone tools. See a stage. See the flickering shadows of people who were just as lonely, just as hopeful, and just as deeply complex as we are today. Perhaps the greatest irony of our modern technological age is that, while we have mastered the art of communication, we are still using the exact same instincts that our ancestors used on the African savanna to decide who we want to sit with, who we want to trust, and who we want to walk through the darkness with. We are still just trying to find our tribe. We are still just looking for a reason to stay. Is the struggle of the modern search for a partner an evolution of our ancient needs, or have we accidentally stripped away the very things that made human connection stable in the first place? Maybe the secret to understanding our future lies not in the next big app, but in the memory of the first campfire.